All right, welcome to Eating Disorders in Midlife, a follow-up conversation. My name is Danny Gillity, the Executive Director at the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone here this evening. Today's workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation and Within Health. I'll be putting information about both of our organizations in the chat. So upon registration, we asked you to submit questions to our presenters, and we got a ton of amazing and insightful questions. We will be working off of those, but if new questions arise during the presentation, please don't hesitate to submit them through the chat feature, and we'll do our best to get to them. The chat will be left open, so we do ask that you stay respectful as you utilize it. Just want to share a few words about the sponsoring organizations. So the Eating Disorder Foundation was founded in 2003 with a mission to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based nonprofit that is now serving individuals and families both nationally and internationally. I want to thank anyone who made a donation upon registration. We're able to provide free services because of the generosity of our community. I'll add the donation link in the chat if anyone wishes to contribute. And now I want to turn it over to Erin Kowalski, Within Health's Director of Business Development, to share a few words about their program and to introduce our speakers this evening.
Thank you, Danny. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us for round two. We are so excited to be here. Within is really excited to partner with the Eating Disorder Foundation. I'm going to do the introductions of our three wonderful women that we have here today and then dive right in. So first up, we have the wonderful Ibitz Newhall. Can we get a wave? Ibitz is a treatment resource consultant working with families to navigate the arc of treatment from admissions to aftercare and beyond. A proud member of the Within Health Advisory, she also created the Recovery Roadmap series with Coach Becky Henry and financial therapist Wendy Wright. She's also very honored to be back on this panel. So thank you, Ibitz. Dr. Leslie Williams, can we get a wave? Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Leslie Williams is a family medicine physician and eating disorder expert. She currently serves as a senior associate consultant in the Department of Family Medicine at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. In addition to her clinical work, Dr. Williams is a passionate advocate for health, equity, and reducing stigma and bias in healthcare. Next up, Wendy, Dr. Wendy Oliver Pyatt. Can we get a wave? Wonderful. Hey. Dr. Wendy Oliver Pyatt is in eating disorders with more than 25 years of clinical experience. She has developed 4 separate treatment programs. Most recently, Wendy has co-founded Within Health, an intentionally virtual eating disorder program for both adolescents and adults. Any other welcomes you guys want to have before we dive in?
I wanted to just say one thing before we start. When we did the talk, whatever month that was, time's flying, I wanted to just say to the foundation and to everybody who's back today, I was really blown away by, I want this to be felt from the heart that with the work that you're doing at the Eating Disorder Foundation and the number of people interested in this subject, not only the number of people interested, but then the audience was so deeply engaged and had so many very rich questions. It really meant a lot to me. And it indicated like we're really touching on a very important subject. And so I'm very, very grateful to the foundation for inviting us to think about this subject more and to talk about it more. It's something very, very close to my heart. And something that I think we're really taking a special place in the lives of many of these individuals who are a little bit older than the typical, quote unquote, typical patient, not that there really is, but just I love doing the work that we're doing and making the difference, and really appreciated that this topic came up, and also that like Leslie and Ibitz, to have you guys do this together with me is really touching. And I could go on and on and on about this, but the lives that we touch and the people that are in midlife that have felt like kind of excluded from treatment, or they were too old to be treatment, or their opportunity to recover already came and went. It just gets me going.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stop. We have
Thank
lots,
you,
so many good
Wendy.
questions, so many good questions.
Where do we
There are.
start?
Yeah,
There are. I know, and I feel like
we have them ready to go. You guys put them together in a really cohesive way for us. So we'll just dive in, right, Erin? Are you the MC?
Absolutely. I think, a great place to start is to really addressing, we got a lot of questions discussing feeling hopeless in midlife and that experience. So to start, this is going to be for IBITs and everyone can pop in, but how can a person who has suffered from anorexia for over 20 years maintain independence and be seen as an adult by those who still see them as a teenager after all these years?
Oof. Thanks for giving that nice little.
Jumping right
softball.
in.
No
Yeah, when
problem.
we read that, it was straight for you, Ibbits. I was like,
Yeah,
that's it.
thanks.
Yeah.
This is, I think, tricky landscape for everyone involved, the individual, the family, friends, coworkers. And, just on a personal note, as a parent of grown children, I sometimes think we struggle as parents to see our kids as the adults that they are, because, I always think of that Steve Martin movie, Father of the Bride, where he's talking to the daughter and all of a sudden she goes, "Dad, I met a man in Rome and he's wonderful and brilliant and we're getting married." And he sees her as a 7-year-old saying this. And I think this is, sometimes what we struggle with as parents. So, I work with families and individuals all the time that are wrestling with this very problem. I'm actually working with a family right now, and we're doing a series of family meetings together to work through these very things. And I would say that in using this family that I'm working with right now as a basis for this, it often starts, and it may need to start with you, the individual, with a transparent conversation about your life now, the steps that you might be taking in order to press forward in your recovery, and the ways in which you need help and support in an adult way, and what it feels like when it's not. It's also important as individuals for us to recognize sometimes that parents and siblings and friends sometimes also bear the scar tissue of this disease, and in their worry and sometimes inability and lack of knowledge of how not to walk on eggshells. They're always afraid of going too far or saying the wrong thing or asking the wrong thing. And, as a parent, I know that I've stepped in it many times with my children, and it's not a great feeling. But as families, we sometimes don't know what to say or do. And so, understanding on the part of the individual how it may have impacted those key relationships is also an important piece of this too, and really having that frank discussion, I think, about on both sides, about how it's felt. And as that individual, whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, you really want to be treated as a full adult. You want to be seen as who you are. And you may need to ask them what they need to see to treat you like that in the way that you want. But you may also need to do a lot of work in guiding them about where you want to be and the kinds of help that you do need and that will be helpful. Leslie, you see clients and families come in and out of your practice all the time. I'm curious, what is some of the advice that you might give somebody who asks this kind of question?
Oh, I think this definitely comes up quite frequently in terms of everyone trying to make that transition into that kind of actualized adult role. And I definitely agree with what you stated, is just having those open conversations when it doesn't feel that way, and being very honest and candid about your personal needs and really helping come along, because everyone's going to evolve at a different rate, right? Like the person themselves that's struggling may feel that they've evolved much faster than their family, because, you know, definitely when the eating disorder happens, the entire family system and the surrounding supports kind of get arrested in that
Yeah.
moment.
Mhm.
And then it takes quite a bit to kind of get out of the quicksand of that moment and
Yeah.
evolve. And so I definitely think that, you know, some of the things you suggested in terms of open conversations and kind of naming what we're feeling is a great catalyst to that change and shift.
I think that's beautifully said, the quicksand of the moment of that incident. Wendy, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, we have so many good questions. I'll
I
just say
know.
one thing that I think we've been interestingly, I'm not meaning for this to sound like a Within infomercial, by the way, like by talking about Within, I'm afraid I'm risking that, but I want to just say this because it's something I've been seeing in our patient population. And part of what is going on here is that there's like, we all have these like parts of ourself, right? So there could be a mature mom or a mature wife that is really doing some kick-ass things in certain areas of her life. Let's say, we're going to just say her for now, but because eating disorders hit midlife for men too, by the way, other subject, but just saying. So a person can be very, very competent in certain areas of their life, but struggle very much so with this eating disorder. If you think of the eating disorder in a more circumscribed way, you could think of it along the lines of a phobia too, right? So one of the things that we've been able to do out Within is that we don't have to necessarily take away everything that's going well in the person's life in order for them to get treatment. And that's actually turned out to be quite an interesting, I think, advantage to this work, where somebody's doing well in certain domains of their life, or they're a very good parent and they're helping their kid with their homework and they set good boundaries with their child around X, Y, and Z, and they have an eating disorder and they have other things that are working out. So by delivering the care in the home and like really zeroing in on the places where the person needs more support, more work, we can kind of move away from that all or nothing thinking, like you're fully just, fully healthy adult just off and running, or like you're this totally sick person that has to like leave and go to treatment.
Mhm.
So that whole slicing and dicing has actually, I think, turned out to be kind of interesting. There's a tendency to pathologize people who don't give everything up to go to treatment. And so I think that this has been a very interesting kind of new thing we've encountered
Mhm.
by doing this type of work.
Yep.
And I think
You better go more quickly, huh?
no, we're doing good.
We get
And
excited.
I would love to pose this to all of you and get feedback, because I think this is really important for everyone to hear. A lot of people wrote in saying, is it even possible to recover from an eating disorder when you are in midlife, or when you've been struggling for so long? And like you were saying, Wendy, a lot of individuals can still do good in different areas and then white knuckle for years through their eating disorder. So what would you all say? Because I'm sure you have a lot of experience seeing individuals reach recovery and move forward in midlife. What feedback would you?
I mean, I would like to just take a start at that, because I feel very, again, passionately about this particular subject. I've seen a lot of patients over the years that have what I would call treatment trauma, or like very negative treatment experiences, especially some of the more mature women that were in some of the earlier treatment settings that were hospital-based settings and things of that nature. But in particular, there is something such as treatment trauma. And when people don't have good experiences in treatment, they tend to give up on treatment. I've been to treatment, I've tried this, I'm still here. And one of the things that I really have seen, and I really want to say that to anybody who's suffering, or pass it on to, yes, iatrogenic treatment, absolutely, in the chat. I want to convey that to the audience, of the potential people affected or therapists, that, prior treatment not working does not mean that treatment will not work. There are major differences in where people enter treatment psychologically, and there's huge differences in these treatment centers. People that don't know much about treatments, they think residential is residential rental. It's not true. There's huge differences in the way we're delivering care at all these different levels of care. And one of our jobs as clinicians is to keep that hope alive and be able to be discerning about the different kinds of treatments and why certain things work and why certain things maybe didn't work along the way. There are components of treatment in my, that I feel pretty opinionated about that need to happen. And time again, I think I've seen people who consider that they've failed treatment when really treatment failed them, or worse, treatment might have harmed them, but they didn't get some very basic components of treatment. So I wanted to just say that it doesn't matter what age anybody is, like we want to like address it in a systematic way, and we can usually see where the holes were when somebody didn't fully recover.
Right.
So,
Can I just jump into, I absolutely love working with mature women, because I feel like they've come to this life stage where I can really kind of pour into them this idea of like, it is your time, right?
Mhm.
Like, like early on, you were being, kind of under the umbrella of your parents. And then oftentimes you kind of quickly shifted into the role of being parent yourself.
Yep.
And you were, pouring into your children or your relationships or your career, whatever that middle section of life, really still kind of pouring into others. But now it's kind of like coming into this horizon of what's next, and it's this opportunity to pour into yourself. And so I just absolutely adore, being able to walk along with them with this idea about, that it's your time. And now they're able to bring this lens, looking back over their life and how their eating disorder may have impacted them or impacted their relationships or shaped their, paths in life. And they're able to bring that lens to the table, and we can just really delve in and just do some great work. So to anyone out there who themselves or has a family member, whatever, who's kind of like, oh, it's too late for me, there is some amazing work that can be done. And I absolutely just adore seeing that spark, right? That, having those light bulbs come on, and then just being able to just really enjoy this life stage and just get some freedom from the eating disorder that maybe has trapped them for so long.
oh my gosh, Leslie, I love listening to you talk, and I love that idea. Like, instead of like, oh my gosh, I've had this eating disorder for so long, I'm never going to get better, I've already tried treatment, you're taking the opposite position. You're saying, now's your time. Now look at all the things you've learned through this process. So I love that. That's a wonderful like kind of counter to that type of thinking. Now's your time.
Right. And as you used to say all the time, Wendy, handing that ball of collaborative treatment back and forth so that it is more of an equal conversation, that I think is, to both of your points, so exciting and possible at this moment in time.
Absolutely. When actually, we're going to start with you, Leslie, going back to you. A lot of individuals were asking about tips on how to support yourself while moving through into menopause, heart health, prediabetes, conditions that typically come with simple aging, without feeling restriction and triggering an eating disorder. Part one and part two, looking at it from someone who's always been athletic, it's very hard to accept the limitations of the body as it ages. So the ED voice very often tells me to focus on my body. So two different parts. I don't know where you want to start, but I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, I think that life stage of kind of maturing and starting to recognize some limitations is definitely one of the things that makes us vulnerable to maybe developing an eating disorder for the first time, or maybe a relapse of some of those thoughts that we had that we thought were, buried far away, is because all of a sudden my body is behaving in ways that I'm not comfortable with, or, my body and I had this agreement in terms of how we did things for years and years and years. And now, she or he is betraying me in some way. And so it's like this need to want to like regain the control and figure out how to do that. And I think that I really try to work with the patients that I work with and even my friends on this idea of,
Mhm.
we want to be in that wonderful friendship with our body and with the foods that we eat and all of that, and really trying to embrace that, and that looking at movement not from this like punishment, you know calorie deficit, weight loss perspective, but like, no, this is how I'm going to maintain my independence and my strength, right?
Strength.
Like, I want to be able to, do all the things that I love to do and do them for as long as humanly possible. I want to be that person. And so I'm going to work more on like flexibility, trying to really, I think that's something that earlier on doesn't tend to get as much attention. But as we mature, we definitely need to work on like flexibility and balance. And it's just kind of like a different way. And I think what I really try to impart upon my patients is that the research really supports the fact that it's more about, that flexibility, that maintaining strength, the content of what we eat, more so than being focused on any particular body weight or shape. It's like as we mature, foods respond differently in our bodies, and that we need to have, an increased curiosity about, hey, maybe, whatever that food was that I used to love forever ago isn't necessarily serving me well, but I found this whole new genre of foods that I really enjoy and my palate has shifted. So I think that we really try to focus on this idea of like freedom and independence and joy, versus like that historical framework of like restriction and trying to somehow maintain or regain our youth through all of these different means that the magazines tell us will be able to achieve it, and just instead embracing where we are.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here because I think we have been given the message that somehow we are going to be able to arrest or turn back the aging process, the natural aging process, by doing all the right things, by exercising fiendishly and eating, certain kinds of foods. And, if I'm being absolutely honest, it is no small matter to try and grapple with the changes. I would love to tell you that I'm completely zen about this myself. I am not. And as I do with those who are younger, sometimes I use the analogy of injury and athleticism. And, I've always liked to play sports and be athletic and physically strong. But it's important that we, to Leslie's point, that we preserve what we have, that we strengthen what we have, that we have joy and freedom. And if you think of giving your body rest and repair, I've shifted over years to sometimes I recognize that I need to have more sleep, or I need to eat more, or I need to give a pause and do other things rather than obsessively exercise because good Lord, I missed a day. So I think it's to your point, Leslie, about, all the things that we want to do so that we can be fierce in the years that ahead, that we can be active participants, but it may shift a bit, and not saying it's easy, but we want to preserve our organs and our tissues and our bone health.
I think it's important, and I just will say this briefly, because we're talking about countering major societal pressures and messages to
100%.
do this, right?
Yep.
And we as people in the field and things like we don't realize this, but we have our own little tribe. Like we
Mhm.
have, even just this group of people on this call, right? We have a group of people here. Some of us know each other, some of us don't, but we really have a way of thinking about all this stuff. A lot of people don't have this way of being, so I really think the more we can and find different ways to help people be a part of a tribe or of a way of being that sort of counters. And I think one of the ways I've tried to educate people in my life that I love is that it's also about like fighting oppression, as we're aging in our society, especially with women, but we're not sort of given necessarily the grace and the honor that we do deserve. And if you look at different cultures, you see a lot of different ways that women are treated in general, but especially as women age, our culture does not really create a normative path to really sort of elevate that matriarch, let's say, in the family. So we kind of have to make ourselves our own queens in a sense, and like put a stake in the ground, and also find others in our life to kind of promote that and support us in that process, because we're fighting a tough force out there.
Make yourself your own queen. I think that's definitely a take-home message that we all
Let's
need.
go. Let's go. We're gonna next talk. We're bringing crowns. We're all.
I think we all deserve it. I love that.
Yeah.
And a question that ties into that we got asked, and I love this question. What are some things or ways that the treatment for eating disorders can be improved to better meet the needs of women in midlife? And Wendy, I would love for you to start by answering this and talking about what we've seen at Within Health.
Sure.
That through our moms group that we launched, right? So building that community around that specific population.
Yeah, I mean, a few things come to my mind. I think overall, the more we can work with families, the better. Whether whomever in the family is affected, so what? Like, the more we can work with families, the better. And it's not always the family therapy that's the most powerful thing. Sometimes it's actually what we call coaching. We do a lot of coaching. So it's helping somebody in that person's life learn how to be a better partner, spouse, sibling, friend. So our groups aren't called family therapy groups. They're, friends and loved ones groups. And so bringing in important people to help support that person is very important, because we're trying to create a culture for that person to live in after they leave treatment that reinforces recovery, because we live in a very pathological culture, right? That reinforces the eating disorder. So I think that's one big piece, is the coaching for the patient, but the coaching for the friends and loved one. We have a men's loved one support group. We're doing coaching with family within before people even come into the program. So this piece of creating this world for the patients to live in that is like a pro-recovery environment is very important, because we're at Within or in our treatment centers, we're pro-recovery environment, but what about once they leave? And on that note, one of our, we just stumbled into this. We had a need to create an extra, the very first time we actually created our second sort of milieu for meal support was, I don't remember what month of treatment we were open, but our dear Chrissy got the idea. We were like, we need a second breakfast. Well, she just got the idea of hey, why don't I just have all the moms have breakfast together? Because we had quite a few moms. So we started a breakfast club as a part of our, so it wasn't a therapy breakfast, it was the breakfast club. And so all these moms were enjoying the breakfast time together. And some of them still do the breakfast club even after they leave treatment. So creating these milieus is important. The coaching, the education, these are just some of the things. And we've talked already about building treatment around the person's life when we can, so that the parts of themselves that are functioning well can continue to thrive, rather than just because if you have to leave and go to 6 hours of treatment, or leave and go to residential treatment and just wipe out all those areas of your life, it's a little bit of a challenge. I would probably be a big pain in the butt if somebody told me I had to do that. I would be a problem.
And Leslie, from a medical standpoint, and if it's from a consultant standpoint, what are some things that you wish you could see change within the eating disorder community and treatment programs to better support individuals in midlife?
Oh man, I have so many thoughts on this. And I mentioned in our previous presentation that Wendy and I started talking about this very soon after I started working for Oliver Pyatt Centers, and about the need to really rethink the way that we work with, we were an all-female facility, how we worked with women at that age and to understand some of the things that each of you have touched on. The need for a tribe, the need for that collaboration, and understanding that extraordinary competence in treatment, understanding that, that someone of a certain age may not necessarily want to be in with a lot of youngsters. They may need some privacy because as we age, our sleep changes, and not to be penalized for being at a stage of life where, we may need to be a little separate and unto ourselves, and not being isolated. I think it's really recognizing too, and offering to these individuals seasoned professionals who are used to working with individuals of a certain age, no matter where they fall on the eating disorder spectrum, no matter what their life experience is, because it's, to really understand what the, as we talked about, the competence, and yet the sort of the deep sense of grief and loss that an individual may be experiencing, and looking back at their lives, at perhaps decades of illness, and how that illness has stolen so much from them, and to really, in a tough way, have to take stock of that. So I think there's so many different elements and nuances of, where an individual is at that point in his, her, or their life. And as Leslie said, how to take this moment by the horns, as opposed to get lost in the sort of sadness and hopelessness and regret. This is a moment. Leslie, over to you, because otherwise I could go on for another 45 minutes, and I'm going to try and zip it.
Thanks, Ivets. I think that two of the things that eating disorder programs could really do in general is flexibility. I think that historically, the way that eating disorder treatment has been structured is it's rather inflexible, and oftentimes more mature patients find themselves, first of all, it feels somewhat condescending for someone to kind of, in a way, take away your freedoms, very kind of nullify the multiple roles that you play, and the importance for you to be able to maintain those while you're simultaneously seeking treatment. And so I think that's one of the things I love about Within, and one of the things that I love seeing evolve in eating disorder care is just being able to be flexible and really honor the fact that people have multiple hats, and this eating disorder is just one slice of the pie, and we need to really honor the rest of that pie as well, and be able to help them maintain that. And I think the way it is now, like with the hours that, a lot of clinicians, at least in my community, keep, and, the inflexibility of being able to really honor all those multiple roles is one area that I really think that we could do better at. And I think also kind of, recognizing, the role changes and the body changes. I think we're so used to kind of invalidating some of the physical things that people are going through, and kind of putting it all under that eating disorder umbrella. But as we mature, there are multiple umbrellas in terms of the different things that are happening in our bodies, and it's not always just a result of or a consequence of the eating disorder, and just being able to work with someone who can kind of see it from those multiple lenses, and really kind of validate that there are true things that are happening within my body, within my psyche, that have everything to do with the fact that I'm maturing. And it's not, the eating disorder is just one aspect of that. So I think those are two things that come to mind when I think about, treatment, and how we need to evolve in terms of what we provide.
Yeah.
Can I just say one quick thing that I think can help?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I think can help with to help break down some of those defenses around working on the eating disorder is if we really can notice the areas of incredible competence that the person does have, rather than just saying you have an eating disorder, so you're totally incompetent and you need to just do everything my way, and sort of in a sense, knock the person down on the developmental, spectrum, like you have an eating disorder, therefore all this other shit is just null and void, and you're going to just like do everything my way. But if we can actually say, and part of why we can do that, it's a physical proximity thing. We can do this because we can still help people get well, right? While they're doing other things. Now, a lot of times we still do have to come back to people, and we do deal with a little denial and avoidance of like, no, you really do need to take time off from, X, Y, and Z, because we need to do meal supported all meals or whatever it may be. Like, I'm not saying that sometimes we still don't bump into that. But the more we can kind of like go, wow, look at how freaking awesome you are with this, this, and this. Let's keep going with that. But hey, let's make sure we get you to, a DBT group, family therapy, body image, a movement group, and X number of meals per week, because we need to actually treat the eating disorder also. And, again, coming back every time you say that, finish up with, and look at all these things that you are doing in your life that are great, and not losing sight of that. Even getting excited about it, getting excited about the competent parts. Let the person lead a group. Let them take the ball and dunk it where they can.
I love that.
Me too. And in regards to, I know we mentioned shame, and Wendy just brought up defenses a lot. What would be some motivational things, or what has helped in the past when because I've seen it many times where patients call and they are tipping their toe a little bit into treatment and what it looks like, because you talked a lot about individuals who have been struggling for a long time seeking care. What about someone who hits that midlife stage and then struggles with eating behaviors? What are some recommendations or suggestions that you would give those individuals who are newer to understanding what eating disorders are in general? If, especially if they have a family and they're a mom, and that shame builds up even more of
what I think
taking care.
One of the amazing things that's happened in our field is the evolution of these wonderful these community groups like the Eating Disorder Foundation. It's really like back in the day when in 2000, you guys started this in 2003. That was when I started my first treatment center, 2003. And it was like, I could count on like part of one hand, all the communities that were out there. Now we have some amazing communities where people can go and really get support and be a part of a community and just learn so much before they even come to treatment. It's really quite astounding, the evolution of the field in that regard.
I mean, I love what you said before, Wendy, about finding your tribe.
Yeah.
We have a tribe. We'd like you all to be part of our tribe so that we can have this conversation and support each other. It's very interesting getting to be a certain age. And of all the things that you think it's going to be like, and how it is both more wonderful and scarier at the same time. And I think we have to understand what that is. And I think that also needs to be part of some of that treatment of what those fears could be also. And that, there's nothing that needs to be unsaid. So the more communities that we can create, the better.
We got a question that I want to highlight. Someone wrote in, how do I navigate recovery and wanting to date/begin in a relationship? I feel that I need to be fully recovered before I start to date, but that feels somewhat limiting.
I have something to say.
I thought you would.
I love that someone sent this in.
I know, I just want to be honest and realistic here. I think over the years in the addiction space and then in some cases in the eating disorder space, there's been such a pathologizing of normal human behavior. And even just like I even see it to this day. Again, I'm not saying people should just have their phones the whole time they're in treatment, but the way we're so we have a tendency in the treatment space to be so kind of pathologizing. I was talking to a mom that was in a residential program and she was, thinking about coming to us, and, we had to hurry up on the phone because she wanted to call her kids and she only had her phone for a certain amount of time. And it was like after programming, I was like, why? So I think that these are normal developmental needs and wants to form relationships and get close to people. And certainly, it can be hard to get into an eating disorder. I mean, get into a relationship in a healthy way when you're really in an eating disorder. But I also think it's sort of unrealistic. And like, who am I to say whether Sally should or shouldn't get into a relationship right now? Who the hell am I? I mean, maybe the person Sally's in a relationship with has a lot of patience or knows somebody had an eating disorder, or, maybe that can be a very healthy relationship in many ways, although Sally may be suffering. I just think we try to do more than what we really, by the grace of God, really have. Yeah, we know how to conduct treatment, but like to say whether or not somebody should be in a relationship, I don't have that enough knowledge to ever say that for somebody. So I think if a person is still struggling with the eating disorder, sure, get as healthy as you can, before getting into a relationship. But if you encounter somebody who's really great in this world and you're able to meet each other's needs, then that's something, very special. I think it would be important to keep communication open and potentially invite that person to be a part of your experience, to get knowledge. And I think the most important thing is to create a space for communication, a formula for communication. Sometimes we just kind of cross our fingers and hope communication will happen. And that can be a problem. You kind of have to create a formula, a built-in way to communicate around these like tricky subjects.
I know that when I'm working with patients that kind of pose that question in terms of when to jump into a relationship, one of the things that I always kind of, query them with is, have you taken that, sorry, my dog, that time to date yourself? Right? Because I think that so often people will kind of jump from relationship to relationship without taking an adequate pause to really date themselves. And it's like, it's taking that moment of like, what kind of things would I want to do if I had no influence from another human being? Like, what kind of things would I be interested in? Because oftentimes we go from, our, influence from our family to like influence from our friends to influence from relationships. And there's never a pause of like, who am I? And just dating ourselves. And so that's one of the things that I usually recommend, just taking that pause, having that period of time, opening up the local entertainment, whatever. I don't think there are newspapers anymore, but just looking at what kind of things you want to do that are interesting to you, so that when you're going into the relationship, you're bringing that person without the influence of others into that space, and that you guys can grow together. So that's one thing that I recommend.
I love that.
That's
Dating
beautiful.
yourself. That's amazing. Yeah, amazing. As looking at this question, I was thinking, oh gosh, I haven't dated in 40 years, but because I've been married that long.
You're lucky.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, how would I feel going on a date at this point? And it's like a mixture of excitement and pure terror. But I think that I love that, Leslie, dating yourself and to also for you to be in the driver's seat, so that you're not looking at yourself through somebody else's eyes, that you are experiencing and being a little, what do I want in my life? What do I want in a person? And being a little picky about it. And then, and what you said, Wendy, about making sure that you're having that communication. It doesn't have to be a bit all that, here's what I've been, here's what I've done, but to invite that person's curiosity about, what you've experienced, and to see how they show up. So yeah, I just you're far better advisors on this than I am, but I tried to imagine what that would be like at this point in time, and I must admit it was
it's
an interesting thought.
one of the things that I wanted to say regarding the communication, and this could be for somebody who's dating who, is still going through a relationship, or somebody who's married or is in a relationship but hasn't sort of, one of the things that I think if there's anything, or one of the things, I'm not going to say if there's anything, but one of the really important things that can come out of when you have family therapy or family coaching, and I can explain the difference or why I think it's important to distinguish the two if you'd like me to, but I think it's important for people who care about people with eating disorders to have a way to express their concerns and a way to know how to communicate those concerns, so they're not siloed with the pain of the worry or the anxiety. And that's that sometimes the eating disorder behavior can silence the other party in a relationship. So if you do enter a relationship, if the person has an eating disorder and is in a relationship, I think one of our challenges as providers, and one of our very important job, is to help our loved patients be able to find a way to communicate with those folks in their life. And each person may have their own thing. I'll always ask the person that we're treating, let's find language that your loved one can use if they're concerned about behavior. It's got to be very specific. It's not just vague. It's got to be very specific. It's got to be clarification. Do you want them to speak up during a meal? Do you want them to speak up after the meal? What do you want them to say something first to get the thing started? What's the best way to do this? And it's got to be very detailed and very specific, and it's very specific to each person. Some person might say, if you don't talk to me about why I'm not eating my rice when I'm eating my rice, like there's a part of me that feels like you don't really care about me, and what's the point? The next patient can be like, if you talk to me about why I'm not eating my rice, when I'm not eating my rice, I'm gonna throw the plate at you, right? So each person might have a different response, and the loved ones deserve, the opportunity to learn. So just saying.
Yep.
And in regards to family dynamics, what advice would you give for someone in recovery who has a fear that their history of disordered eating has kind of fallen down to their kids? Even though they're trying to show all foods fit philosophy, they seem to have a healthy relationship, but also they feel like it's impacted them.
I think that this would be great for Leslie to talk about what she did when she wrote her book, and kind of just talk a little bit about that, because whatever we've done in the past, we always have right now, and we can always start with where they're at. And I love Leslie's story about her book.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. So I know I personally grew up in a household with a mother who was very focused on weight and shape, and I was quite determined not, in my mind, to pass that legacy on. She had some valid reasons for being concerned, but yet and still, I felt like there has to be a better way to spend your adult life than worrying about these things. And so I was working in eating disorders and felt like I was raising these, completely like body positive and well-evolved children. And from an early age, my daughter started expressing body image distress. And I was desperately trying to find, things to show her that her body was okay. And she very candidly told me, even in preschool, that can't be true, because when I look around, I don't see people that look like me. They're not in my books, they're not on TV, they're not. So even though you're my mother and you love me and you say these things, that can't be true. And so I recognize that no matter how well we're doing ourselves in our own kind of process and what we think we're imparting upon our children, they're still very vulnerable to the society that we live in. And so that kind of prompted me to write a children's book with image of a little brown girl with curly hair and round cheeks, and really represented my daughter so that she could see, you are okay. And it was called Free to Be Me, Self-Love for All Sizes. And so I think that it's not only ourselves trying to do our own work and be able to demonstrate and model for them that body positivity, but it's also like what we surround them with and what they see, because regardless of how much we do, society is so much bigger than we are as a parent. And so that's where we want to plant those seeds and we want to surround them, but recognize that they're going to continue to struggle because of the society that we live in. So we can maybe kind of take a little bit of that guilt away from ourselves, because I think as parents, there's enough to be guilty about outside of that.
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, I will just say one thing. You mentioned that guilt. My very first book I wrote, I have a chapter in there that's called Preventing Eating. It relates to preventing eating disorders. And I'm like, why did I even write that chapter, that name? Like, it implies that you can do that, and it's a tough thing to, actually prevent eating disorders in this culture. But I want to just say to that specific question, whoever wrote it, okay, all right, I get it. You're where you're at now, and maybe whatever you did could have potentially had an impact on somebody that you love, and that's painful, and that sucks. That feels bad. And the fact that you're like here and like asking the question and thinking about it, like you have a great opportunity right now to put those words and into, those thoughts into words that you can direct in a loving way to that person, because that conversation could be very, very powerful that you might have to talk about, hey, I'm worried about this. And hey, this is a new way I'm thinking about this. And hey, I'm sorry that I might have affected you in this way. And I want to do better, and I'm learning. Those are really, really, for us as parents also, I can definitely say this, our kids, as they get a little older, they see us more and more for the human that we are, not just like mom, but like we're that, and the more we can sort of show our own vulnerability, like, hey, this is something that I did have a hard time, and it really did affect my parenting, and I love you, and I'm sorry because I can see how it hurt you. That's so powerful. That's so powerful.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. I've got so many thoughts about, my own parenting and having to apologize to my daughter for some of my attitudes and the ways that I didn't even realize I was being. And I love the fact that, you said, Wendy, that you just admit vulnerability and mistakes we make and the things that we think we've got the right idea, and sometimes we just step in it anyway. And sometimes we're just doing the best we can, and sometimes it's the right thing, and sometimes we can mess up a little bit.
I love, vulnerability is something that I think is so key when it comes to talking about recovery and, seeking out support. And I think, I know we only have a couple more minutes, but really, understanding how important it is to, like Wendy said, be a part of your tribe, and doing so, it is vulnerability that ties into that, right? I want to, we have a couple of minutes. If there's any live questions that anyone has, I would love for us to share them here now.
Say something?
Absolutely.
Erin, you are a very wise woman. You're a very passionate woman, and you're always in that taking the lead, and you have probably lots of things. Oh, we have a question, but also, is there something that you would like to share about this?
Well, what I would like to share, because I'm old school and take notes, what I'm going to be taking from this is a couple of things that I heard today, and I would love to reshare with everybody. One is, this would really hit me too, is a lot of times people feel like treatment failed them, but sometimes they failed treatment, but in reality, sometimes treatment fails them. And
that's a slide from a talk from a long time ago. That's never
That is a good one. Also, date yourself first. Leslie, I'm taking that. That's
I
a
like
great-
that one. I'm
That
down
is
with the figures
incredible.
first. Yeah, I like
And
that one.
also, it's your time, right? Always
Yeah.
making sure you're leaning into that. And those are just three really beautiful things that came out from tonight. So I just appreciate you all sharing that. And I see a lot of hands happening right now. So if we could have Rachel B, do you want to speak or you can type? Let's see.
Hi,
Hey, there she is.
hello there. I'm in New York City. It's good to see some familiar faces, some not. But I had actually typed a question about TSAB in the chat. So I'm scrolling to it. I was actually just thinking about the group 30 somethings and beyond. It's a common group across different eating disorder treatment centers. So I was actually wondering if you had any thoughts about the group in itself being ostracizing and also invalidating as a 30 something in proud wellness, which is the word I choose. I personally feel not a lot in common with people 40 years older than me or even 30 years older than me. And it feels, it's kind of like lumping a lot of people together that may not really have a lot in common, except for perhaps the fact that they've struggled with an eating disorder the longest out of anybody in the treatment community. So I was just wondering if you guys all
I'm going to say
have thought
something
about that.
that I'm just going to share my experience, and it's kind of, I think everybody has different thoughts about this, but over the years, one of the things I have discovered is that I'm really bad at matching up who's going to bond with who.
Yeah.
And so whether, sometimes be like, oh, the two people that are blank are going to be great together, and it's like wrong.
Yeah.
I have actually found that the human beings it's not so much about what age people are, it's more about how they're approaching relationships that ties into how they connect with others. If somebody comes in and just is like, people will come in and be like, there's this and there's that, like, it's hard to open up. I'm not blaming the person for not being able to open up in that setting, but the game changer in connecting isn't so much about, in my opinion, it's not so much matching people, it's helping people open up and be vulnerable. That's our job as clinicians, is to help people open up and be vulnerable, because I'm 57 years old, and like, I can hang out with a 12-year-old and like have an amazing experience, and vice versa. I think so. I that's just what I think. That's my thing is more about how helping people be open to relationships versus matching people by age. So not to say that I don't love having like a group with like older people, or a group this, or I love doing that, but I just think as far as like the bonding, it's more about like what we're bringing in, and our therapeutic purpose is to help people be more open and receptive to connection.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then I know we had another, is it Rochelle F? And then I know we are at the 8 o'clock dot. So I'm going to make sure we get that one though.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's Rachel. I was just going to ask, what do you as clinicians think, when do you guys think harm reduction services are going to be incorporated in the community to meet the client where they're at? Since harm reduction is adopted by other countries and it's working effectively, how do you see that fitting in to the United States' thinking, in essence?
Well, Leslie, you wanted to say, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yes, sorry, I raised my hand. I wanted to touch on that quickly. I definitely think, back to that idea of eating disorder treatment evolving, that's definitely one of those areas where there's still a lot of controversy. And I know personally, I've worked with patients from that harm reduction lens, kind of like taking more of a like a palliative care type of approach of like, what do you see as, your goals, and how can we help achieve those, versus spending so much time and energy with like the treatment team versus the patient, you're not doing what we say, and it's just like constantly conflict. And so I've had a lot of patients where we've tried to shift kind of that approach, to your point, to more of like a harm reduction model. And I find that it feels so much better in terms of that, patient relationship and how we can really move forward. But I will say, in terms of the eating disorder professional community as a whole, I think there's still a ways to go in terms of people embracing that. I think there's still kind of this, dare I say, almost like a patriarchal kind of approach to treatment, of like, this is the way that it's done, and you need to fall in here and do it as such. And so I thanks for that that question, and I definitely think that that's part of the evolution. But if the answer you're hoping for is a set date on when we will have achieved that, I can't predict that.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just wanted to let Rachel be. I saw your chat and I have your, I screenshotted the chat, so I have your email address. Just wanted to let you know that, because I couldn't type fast enough. And then on that harm reduction question, that's really interesting, because a couple thoughts come to my mind, and I know we probably have to stop, so I'll just say it as fast as I can. To me, there's this like kind of two things to weigh, right? It's like, okay, I'm down for harm reduction. I want to reduce harm. I want to bring peace, and I just want to help people feel better, right? Like that I definitely want to do that, right? So how do I hold on to, I want to be a healing force. I want to leave people better than I found them, right? While I also hold on to this idea that, like, I believe every damn person can recover from an eating disorder when effective treatment is provided, right? And just because person X had, I don't care if you had 40 effing treatments, like, I've seen it happen. I believe that if we do this right, we can get there. So for me, it's like holding both of those things at the same time. And one of the things I've had to work with in my own mind is that when I first started my first treatment center in 2003, I was so ideological. It was sweet. I thought I thought like everybody was going to come to my little treatment program, and I was just going to bust my ass and get it right. And like everybody was going to leave, like they were come, and then here's the recovery line, and everybody was going to get to the recovery line and then leave, right? Because I was going all in, right? So that was like my hope. And that I learned over the years that like not everybody can, and this was humbling, like not everybody can just even stay in treatment as long as they need to, or not everybody, people go through psychological readiness debate based on other things going on developmentally in their own brain and in their world and their life. So I've even had to work with the teams on this sometimes, because sometimes our staff will say, well, she's really resistant. Like, if he doesn't even really, they're not even motivated. Like, they don't even want to come. They're not even motivated. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if they're not motivated. Like, I mean, I love them to be, but I see a lot of people, it's like, it's okay to come not motivated, because maybe our harm reduction in that case, okay, maybe the person isn't going to do this or this or this that I maybe want them to do. But if I'm able to touch that person, I'm saying I'm meaning the treatment program. So that, sorry for sounding crazy like that, because it's not me, but if we are together able to like touch that person in a meaningful way, right, and have relationships with them, and maybe instill some hope, or have them see maybe a pathlight of recovery or how it could happen, but maybe they're not going to do, like, it's okay, like that's harm reduction, right? And we gave them support, we gave them love, we gave them care, we shared our own perspectives, we dialogue, like, so we're still doing something in the world that's meaningful for that person, even though somebody else might say it's harm reduction, so why does it matter? Because like, they don't really want to get better. That's okay. I helped them in my mind. If I connected with them, if you ate with you and he had a piece of butter with bread or something like that, the person may not have had for 20 years. I'm down with that. You guys have an amazing group.
Yeah.
Danny, I don't know how you bring these people together. It's like a very special group of people.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure a lot of them were your people as well. And just want to thank our presenters and for your insight and for your passion and the love that you bring. I think it's so important just to be able to sit in this space and feel so connected and validated and seen and all of those things. So thank you to the three of you so much, and to Erin for facilitating so beautifully tonight. And yeah, we're out of time. So if anything has come up or feels lingering, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Erin, and we'll get your answers or your questions answered. But I hope everybody has a lovely night, and thank you again to everybody who put so much time and energy into this.
I want to thank Leslie and Ibbotts again for joining me. Like, your guys' passion and wisdom is amazing. I've been able to do presentations now with Leslie a couple times, and you're such a wonderful person to present with, and I always benefit from time with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, everybody. I feel the same. This was amazing, and we really appreciate sharing.
It's wonderful.
Take good care, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank
Wishing
you all so
everybody-
much.
Wishing everybody peace.
Mwah.
Take care.
God
Bye.
bless you guys. Thank you.
God bless
course.
you guys. Take care.
Bye.